I sit in this Diary of a CEO studio a lot, and I sit in Dragon's Den's little dungeon a lot. I spend a lot of time sat at my desk inside without any sort of natural light. So I've started taking vitamin D supplements frequently because actually I went to the doctors, did my tests. And
How low was it?
How low was it? It was very low. They said, everything's fine, Steve. You're all good here, here, and here. I did like the full body. I did my testicles to my toes to everything, my blood, everything, my moles, whatever it might be. And the one thing he did say to me is your vitamin D levels are low. So I've started supplementing. How crucial is vitamin D for healthy immune system?
You know what? It's a hormone that affects so many organ systems. It's important for your bones. It's important for your immune system. It's important for your brain. So it's something that everyone should supplement. They should get their level checked. We're all low. And then we should supplement up and then have it rechecked so that you can have a maintenance dose. You usually take it with potassium to help absorption. Magnesium is another key player with vitamin D.
What if I want really strong bones? What should I be taking?
Vitamin D, potassium, magnesium.
Yeah.
You should be eating 1 gram of protein for every ideal body pound you have. So you build muscle to help your bones. You know, there's some remote data on boron and zinc, but I'd rather you have the 3 that we know work. To build strong bones, you not only need muscle, you need proper nutrition, you need to, I should find another term, but you need to bash your bones. You need to impact your bones. The mechanical stress of impacting bones, whether it's jumping up and down, running, going up and down the stairs. For people with poor bone density, you can use a reformer, which is a trampoline, is all important for sending the biomechanical signals to your bone that you're doing work, you need stronger bones. That is transformed into a biochemical signal that makes your bones, that your bone cells lay down new bone. That's how you keep healthy bones across a lifespan.
Can you grow new bone?
You can, yes, you can actually. You can increase your T-score. It's a multifactorial. T-score is a score that we measure using a test called a DEXA scan. A DEXA scan will tell us not only our absolute bone density, but compare us to healthy people. And this DEXA scans are usually used for women or older men who have fallen and fractured. But a T-score tells us what our bone density is compared to a healthy 30-year-old, right? Assuming a 30-year-old has laid down optimal amounts of bone. And we can talk about how that's becoming not true. But so once we know our T-score, it tells us the health of our bones, just to give us a gauge of can we rebuild. So yes, all the things. We can lift weights, we can impact our bones, we can have proper nutrition. If we are a woman and have lost our estrogen, which starts in our 40s, not our 50s, it starts in our 40s, we can make our estrogen decision, as I know you've talked about before, because estrogen and testosterone are critical in bone health. And then if you show up with a T-score that shows that you have frank osteoporosis, even 2 million men in the United States have osteoporosis. Osteoporosis is critical bone density weakness, meaning a T-score of -2.5. So this is how it goes. So remember in the tests in lower school where they would grade you on this bell curve?
Mm-hmm.
Straight up the middle is bone density at 30 in a healthy woman, for instance, 0. Any positive number for your T-score, your bone density is more than 0, perfect, you're all good. Bone density 1 standard deviation or -1 below a 30-year-old healthy woman is called osteopenia, meaning your bone density is getting low, we really got to step up our efforts. A bone density number, a T-score, -2.5 is the definition of frank osteoporosis, which is bones dangerously brittle. That score, plus there's this index called a FRAX index, F-R-A-X index, which takes all your lifestyle risk, meaning, is your mother shrinking? Do you have a family history of osteoporosis? Did you already fracture? Fracture is the number 1 predictor of future fracture. Did you smoke your whole life? Did you have an illness where you had to take a lot of steroids that break down bones? Are you of genetic makeup where you're predisposed to bone density? The FRAX index takes all those and calculates your risk for having a fracture in the next 10 years. So a T-score of minus 2.5 and a FRAX index of 3.6 or 3, meaning I have a 3% chance of a fracture in the next 10 years. Those are indications for employing some of the pharmacologic drugs to either maintain bones or to build bones. And there's a few categories of those that I usually send people to an endocrinologist to weed out. It's kind of a complex decision.
If I was getting to that stage, what kind of things would you tell me that I needed to do? So if I was getting to the stage where I was -2 on that scale.
If you were already a minus 2.5, we would have a long, hard discussion about all the lifestyle interventions, nutrition, lifting. You can still lift. How we're going to add mobility, impact, how we're going to get some impact in without breaking a bone. But we're also going to have a conversation about our hormone status. And we're also going to, if you're already that low, have a conversation about whether we use a pharmacologic augment like bisphosphonate or Forteo or some of the drugs that are available to support bone density. And each person, man or woman, has to have their individual risks assessed to know which road to go down. But what we cannot do is we cannot ignore it and hope that it goes away.
Yeah. You've done so many studies, and I find studies really fascinating because they're first party in that regard. So it's really finding things out for the first time. What are some of those studies that we haven't discussed that relate to our conversation today that you find most interesting?
Yeah. So we'll start with bone because we're just talking about, in masters athletes, we did 2 studies looking at could we preserve bone density across a lifespan if we took the variable of sedentary living out of the equation. So in the first studies that my group did, we formed a group called PRIMA, the Performance and Research Initiative for Masters Athletes. We looked at 3,000 masters athletes. You had to be 50 years old, and they were competing in the National Senior Games, which is like Olympics for people over 50. And these weren't just everybody that could go. These were the people who had qualified in their state games to go to the national games. So we looked at 3,000 of them. We did 2 bone studies. We found the first question asked, could we maintain bone density across upper age limits because we were active? And what we found was that, yes, a very high percentage of people even up into 85 had normal T-scores. But then we did a second study that we wanted to ask, okay, so of all the activities you could do, what would make the biggest response from your bone? And not surprisingly, we found that impact exercise, the running sports, the volleyball, the basketball sports versus the swimming, the biking, the bowling, for instance, there's bowling in Senior Olympics. Those with sports where you impacted your bone, that impact exercise was as predictive of bone density as things you can't control, like your age, your sex, your genetics. And so it just shows how important putting mechanical stimulus against your bone is. So that was really important. So even bones can be preserved. We've already talked about the muscle preservation study, which was fascinating. The very first question I asked was to answer the question, this is this virus in your brain. When do we really slow down? When can we say, oh, I'm just getting old, I'm going to slow down? Based on the athletes I saw, I knew that it wasn't 50. So I studied 3,000 of these athletes again. I looked at all the track and field athletes. I looked at athletes in the 100-meter all the way up to the 10,000 meter. So all distances, sprints versus long distance. I looked at finish times of the top 8 finishers in every age category. And here's what I found. To answer the question, when do we significantly slow down? It's not 50, it's not 60, It is not until our mid-70s when we significantly slow down if we use athletic performance as a biomarker of aging. So what does that mean? The example is this. If you put a bunch of men in a 1-mile race, the 50-year-old man, in the year I did the study, finished that 1-mile race in 5 minutes and 34 seconds. To put that in perspective, the boy that won the Pennsylvania State High School games won his mile in 5:17.
Oh, wow.
I know. 20 seconds in 30, 40 years, right?
How old was he?
17. Let's say he was 17. But the 50-year-old winner did in 4:34. The 70-year-old winner of that mile race did it in 7 minutes. So nobody was getting lapped, right? So I used those times to see how much we slow down. Before age 70, we slow down less than 1.2% a year, timing-wise. So after 70, there is a rapid decline in times, or you get slower and slower and slower. And I call that biology taking over. Either you don't have the mindset to work that hard anymore, or you've got enough injuries that you can't work that hard anymore, or you've lost enough lean muscle mass or bone flexibility. But what it tells us is that we have no excuse until our mid-70s.
If you love the Diary of a CEO brand and you watch this channel, please do me a huge favor. Become part of the 15% of the viewers on this channel that have hit the subscribe button. It helps us tremendously, and the bigger the channel gets, the bigger the guests.